Okay, let's have our next panel about hurricanes. Bob Janusaitis, Gary Gardner, and Dave Christensen. Will you come up and share with us some information on Harvey, Irma, and Maria? And then we will go to the technology people that have a few minutes each to tell us about the interesting technologies, and then we'll wrap it up for the day. So take it away, guys.
Thank you. I had some slides. Good, thank you. Okay, so hang on, that's the wrong slide deck. That was yesterday.
Just talk to it, no problem.
Okay. I'll start as they're loading it up. I just wanted to kind of set the context for this to give you an idea of the scope of Hurricane Harvey. As I mentioned earlier, there was 33 trillion gallons of water that fell on Houston in about a 3-day period. That's equivalent to 275 trillion pounds of water. Analysis was done by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory that said that the planet, the crust, actually warped about 2 centimeters because of the sheer weight of the water. It was equivalent to 77% of the total estimated mass of Mount Everest. Give you some idea of the water that fell. We had 52 inches of water in one part of Houston for that 3-day period. Okay, so just a couple of quick things. This information is constantly changing. At the point this was printed about a couple weeks ago, estimated housing units affected was about 312,000 housing units in the Houston area. As I said, 51.66 inches of rain. Remarkably, we had 36 fatalities in Harris County, which is unfortunate. But compare that to Rita, when we evacuated. We had over 120 people in Harris County that lost their lives due to evacuation. This is basically the area of Texas that was affected by Harvey. It's equivalent to the area from Boston to about Washington, D.C. So that gives you 46 counties, I believe, is what the total was for Texas. The purpose of this, and this may be a little hard to see in the back, the light pink area is the areas that were officially FEMA designated flood zones. Okay, the red is areas that were outside of the flood zone. Okay, so about 40% of the buildings estimated by FEMA were flooded, were minimal flood hazard. By the calculations, the current flooding represents, it was our third 500-year flood in 3 years. So we have some work to do as far as identifying the areas. This is the area of town where I live. You can see there in September we had 29 point something inches near my home. I did not get flooded. And we have, at the point this was run, 80 inches of rain for the year. And we average normally about 38 inches of rain for year annual rainfall. Couple of quick things. One of the big problems we experienced was the saturation of the 911 system when the flooding got really bad. And it got to the point where people would call and they'd hang up because they didn't get an answer, and they just made the problem worse because you're required to call people back. So it just was a snowballing effect. After that started happening, we were actually starting to get calls from out of state calling into Houston trying to locate people to rescue people. Going the wrong way. To give you an idea, this is another area where we really don't have a good idea on how many people were rescued or evacuated. This is an example of fire departments basically in northwest Harris County. And as you can see, there's approximately 5,400 rescues, and I'd say that's probably 20% of what actually happened in our area, because a lot of the statistics were carried on by the Cajun Navy or the Texas Navy, people that were out there just collecting people. They'd get a call for one house, and they'd pick up 4 people, and as they were going down the street, they'd pick up 10 more, or whatever it was. So it's really difficult to identify how many people were rescued. In the fire department, where I'm a commissioner, we alone had 1,500, and we actually had 498 rescues in one day. So it's enormous. Probably the key thing that happened was when Judge Ed Emmett, and you probably saw this, made the decision and said, do you have a high water vehicle or boat in helping and rescue, call this number. And that was really what we did to compensate for the 911 issue. All the coordination of the rescues at that point was done by the fire marshal's office, and they actually did it with Post-it notes. So they'd get a call, and they'd go, what part of town? And they'd put a Post-it note on a wall, and they would manage the whole thing that way, because it was beyond CAD at that point. They couldn't really do it with CAD. There's a video which we really don't have time for, but I'll pass it along in the slide deck. I worked in the Joint Information Center during that time. It was amazing to see the cooperation of the people throughout the area. The media was, in this case, outstanding. I can't say a negative thing about them. They actually helped this time. They were very supportive. They got the word out. The two big things that we had that would have changed significantly is we had power and we had cell phone service. We had about, I think, 300,000 people in Texas that were out at any one time, but that was pretty much in the Rockport area, the areas that were really hit hard with the wind. We had really no wind in the Houston area, and about 95% of our cell service was still available. And that was a key determinant in rescuing people, because a lot of the rescues that took place were done through social media. They were done through Zello. They were done through a number of social media technologies. So if that had not occurred, I think the situation would have been extremely bad. So those are just a couple things.
I'm going to do it sitting down. So I'm not in emergency management, but I am part of New Jersey InfraGard. I work very closely with New York InfraGard, and I've got some members in the New York City InfraGard that are emergency management, so they asked me to do a review of the Puerto Rico incident. I looked at probably 160 documents from September 20th to October 20th, and that was from various agencies. So what I'll do is I'll give you a quick summary of the information that I was provided to, and then some of the meetings, and I'll talk through some statistics and take a couple of questions. By no means an expert on the Puerto Rico incident, but I've read a lot, and hopefully I'll bring some closure to some of the questions. So out of the reports provided to me through the P3 meetings, the private-public partnership, those documents came from FAA, New Jersey State Police, FCC, obviously FEMA, DOT. There's actually an animal rescue team that was focused on the island for animal rescue, New Jersey Office of Emergency Management, Puerto Rican local government, as well as news reports from CNN, CBS, and other local news outlets. So the hurricane hits obviously around September 17th. They have declared a state of emergency around the 20th. We're talking about 150 mile-an-hour winds. As a living, I do very complex IT infrastructure software engineering projects. I can't imagine the scope of the complexity of destroying an island with millions of people on it. The physical devastation and the chaos and an aftermath to try to organize, to bring, what did Bruce say, water and food initially to people, and then you work on things like electric, communications, sanitation. It just, the numbers are astronomical to think through that, and I deal with very big systems. One of the things that jumped out at me when Bruce was talking this morning is he was talking about driving around the island and communicating. There was a lot of miscommunication. I was on probably about 10 or 15 of these P3 meetings. InfraGard was offered to sit in because we have contacts to pretty large companies, and if we can offer support, you know, we obviously would. There was a lot of information flowing, just, I think it was too much information. I think people got overwhelmed with the amount of information, and then when you have too much information going out, there's disinformation. And people are getting their numbers crossed as to what's the real number, right? How many ports are really down? How many airports are not functioning? And I'll talk generally about that. So, I don't know if anybody knows, but Puerto Rico power generation is mostly in the southern part of the state. I'm also a licensed electrician, so I know a little bit about power. You have to run the electric lines over the mountains. So, like, getting those repaired is just, again, it's unthinkable. You gotta fix the roads, fix the lines, get the power there. Think about the miles and miles of lines that have to be repaired in order to get power to a remote location when your generation is in the southern portion of the island. Somebody brought up, you know, power generation needs to be near the facilities or the cities, and that's part of being more resilient, right? Well, again, it's hopefully to reduce the impact on the lines and those generation signals that you have to transfer all of that energy and then repair it in a storm. I think Puerto Rico is a really good example for the EMP community because we can see the physical damage and we can understand the magnitude of recovering. And the first thing that we're all here for is about saving lives, right? We want to save American lives. And then we want to make sure that this stuff really doesn't happen. So I think the physical damage in Puerto Rico is a good example of how an emergency management was talking about it before, you know, how we actually go after restoring recovery and then preparing with more resilience. So I was talking a little bit about the power generation. So beyond dropping and attempting to drop water and food into key locations, and again, they did prioritize those key locations, but there were so many people and agencies communicating. There was some misses. I'm going to leave it at that. There was a lot of food and water responses, but getting the people to those locations was very difficult, right? Roads are damaged. I mean, even if you had a vehicle, a working vehicle, unless you had some significant chainsaws and chains to drag the stuff out of the way, you're not going very far. So most of this transportation now is foot. How far can you go on foot in the heat? I mean, it's just these things, the variables and the complexities just they keep adding. And again, I'm on some of these meetings and I'm listening to the people, and the people are very cooperative. I didn't hear any bantering whatsoever. Everybody was very supportive and very cooperative. I think the challenge was, it was just way too much for them to handle. If you think about a local disaster, and let's say that we lost this building for some reason and we just couldn't function, and you could walk to the next building, right? It's much easier if it's a proximity thing, it's a small proximity incident. When it gets very large like that, like how many people do you put on the ground to support an island recovery? 5,000? 50,000? You really need boots on the ground. And the people there, let's say the National Guard there, are worried about their family. So now you gotta bring in recovery people to help your National Guard get back up and running to take care of their people first. Again, the numbers, if you think about the numbers, it gets mind-boggling. So that's what I kept hearing, is they kept throwing more and more and more people on it. I have some good friends in New Jersey State Police, and we had some conversations after that. Newark Police went out, Jersey City Police went out, Massachusetts State Police went out. So not only did the New Jersey FEMA Region 2 send people out there to support the Puerto Rican police, but they also went to their state neighbors and cities, and they started enlisting other police officers to get them out there to help make sure things were safe. And the reports I read, I didn't hear any. I think it was one incident of a car in the 4 weeks that the police were actually supporting Puerto Rican law enforcement. So part of what's happening with the P3, the private and public partnerships, I heard a lot of good things about the private sector providing water and food. I didn't hear anybody say we couldn't do something, which was pretty amazing. I mean, I know it wasn't fast enough for people, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But if you think about, I think Bill Harris sent out a report to our team that talked about the 45-day statistics. It's pretty amazing. I mean, we're talking about somewhere between 60 and 80% recovery of a number of key things. One was communications, which, I mean, you can't do anything without good communications. I keep going back to think about the cell phone towers, the distance between these, the roads being down, and these people being able to fly to these various locations and repair these things. They just kept throwing bodies after bodies of boots on the ground, we don't have enough, let's send more people. And it became a numbers game, and I think the more they got into it, the more they realized we just didn't have enough people in the locations to do what we need to do. So as they go through this, and again, I'm listening to these reports at the 45-day mark, it had changed a lot in that last 2 to 3 weeks, according to the analysis that I had, because I think the teams realized we just didn't have enough pre-positioned assets to do what we needed to do, right? I think they brought in, there was a cruise ship brought in, there was a Navy ship brought in to bring meals and emergency supplies, medical supplies, and then the cruise ship came in to supplement them. I don't know people's perception of FEMA, but I think this level sets what FEMA should and should not be doing. FEMA is there to support the local people in recovery and to get them initial food, water, communications, and get them up and running. They're not there to be there for 2-3 years and help establish the facility again. They're in and out, and that's what they're designed for. And I think that's a misconception. People are like, well, they're just not doing enough. They weren't planning to recover the whole island. That wasn't the intent of FEMA. But that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get in there and try to recover as much as they possibly can. And I personally think the teams that were in there were doing an awesome job. I think it was way beyond what they thought they were walking into. Because I know a couple of days before the incident, they had teams positioned in St. Croix, Puerto Rico, St. John, and I saw it in the after-action reports that I was reading. We had assets there. It wasn't enough, and I think the public, and obviously the Puerto Ricans, and I've been to Puerto Rico many times. I love the island. I love the people. They want it fixed, right? We're talking about loss of life, loss of home, people's families. You have nothing, and you have to go find a place to start over again while your house is destroyed. So let me back up a second and say, for those people who don't know about Puerto Rico already had issues with the electric system. We have challenges here with electric systems. Puerto Rico's electric system was already degraded. They already had some challenges, and they had a plan for repairs and recoveries that they just didn't get to yet. So the storm came in and compounded the problem. And Puerto Rico, before this incident, they had some financial challenges as well. And if you don't know that, now you got to try to recover your island while you're in the midst of a financial difficulty. People are leaving your island. You don't have tourism because you're losing the tourism component as well. It just was the worst case scenario for them. So again, I think the teams did a great job. I think, again, the loss of life was minimized. There were deaths, but I think it was minimized because they did prioritize. I just don't think we had enough boots on the ground to do what we needed to do, day one.
I want to hit about 3 topics, and the first one is magnitude. This is the first time in a long time that I can remember that we had something, any one of those storms would have been a significant event for any one of those areas, right? But it was in 3 different areas, and it was one right behind the other, okay? So if you're expecting the cavalry to come in, to your point about FEMA, I think FEMA was really, first of all, I applaud them. I think considering the magnitude of what they had to deal with, they did a heck of a job. But I don't think they were geared for or anticipating having 3 events like that of such magnitude. So if you look at what we've talked about over the next few days, where's FEMA in an EMP? Nah. I mean, maybe they can affect and help continuity of government around here to a large extent, but nationally. I mean, the scary thing going forward we all need to think about is with the climatic changes that we hear are coming, there's a possibility of these type events next year, okay? So have we learned a lesson? Have we thought about what we need to do to be prepared going forward? We really need to seriously think about that. The other thing that we haven't talked about the last couple of days is civil order. And when you have events like this, you do have a breakdown in civil order. And there were issues in Houston, and fortunately in that area, and fortunately they weren't, exacerbated or bad, but, there's animals that live in each of these areas. I dealt with them for a long time, and they're animals, okay? The gangs, the drug elements, okay? You think because there's a bad storm, they sit at home and go, oh, well, I'm not going anywhere? Nah. They normally prey on people. So what do they do when they're going to continue to prey on people, okay? And they're looking to have what they have not. And when you have your public safety personnel, particularly law enforcement, that's tied up heavily doing rescues, responding to other issues, the normal type of law enforcement function, is stretched considerably. And that was very definitely true in Virgin Islands and in San Juan, a la all these officers being brought down from up here. I remember about 20-some years ago when there was a really bad storm just like this down in the Virgin Islands, and the FBI sent almost the entire hostage rescue team and about 8 different SWAT teams down to enforce law in the territory because their law enforcement capability was just almost devastated as a result of the storm and taking care of their families. And that's a reality, folks, okay? Whether it's National Guard or it's somebody else, people worry about and are concerned about their families. And, if I've got to walk 10 miles to work or stay home and take care of my family, the option frequently is going to be, I'm going to stay home and take care of my family. So, but the bright side, think about all the things that we have talked about over the last 2 days: hardening, microgrids, okay, rebuilding. We have a tremendous opportunity in Puerto Rico right now. Tremendous opportunity. Okay? It's not a matter of whether we're going to spend the money to rebuild their infrastructure. It's really not. We're gonna. Okay? But how are we going to do it? Are we going to do it right? And are we going to take into account the things that we've learned and we've thought about? We have a chance to make that little island the star of the Caribbean. Think about that. I'm amazed at the number of people that have left the island. And they're now up here, and they don't have jobs. They don't have their normal support structure. They're stressing already stressed environments, particularly in Florida. Okay? And they see no real opportunity going home. So how are they just going to stay here and make it? All right? But if we take that opportunity and figure out how do we turn that island around and how we make that really a star in the Caribbean, a lot of those people will go back home. There will be jobs and employment, okay? Think about the things that went wrong with like the pharmaceutical industry down there as a result of the storm. Well, let's don't just build back or say, well, we're not going to Puerto Rico. We're going to move that out of there. Okay, how do we adjust, compensate, and put in those type of safeguards that can keep those manufacturing facilities, so they are more resilient and able to bounce back faster. I think the biggest problem in Puerto Rico is there was no resiliency. They just couldn't, I mean, it was so overwhelming to bounce back. And I know a lot of people that are down there working on different things in projects and trying to put things back. And they're just like, oh my God, you know. I mean, most of the people were going down, there was no place to stay. There were people staying in tents. Okay? How many workers do you know nowadays that aren't accustomed to air conditioning, right? Going back to the hotel? We've gotten to be a very soft society, right? So it's tough on people in those type of instances. So we take these things and we learn from them, or we're destined to be in the same problem areas that we were confronted this year. Climate change is a reality. What's causing it, I don't know, okay? But it's like, you know, Doc said, if electricity's out, it's out. It's irrelevant to some extent, at least. At the point it's out, it's sort of irrelevant of what caused it, unless that causation is a factor in being able to, you know, bring it back online fairly quickly. But other than that, it's out, okay? Well, if we're in for some storms over the next few years, and I can remember as a kid, years ago, we went through cycles of bad storms out in the Midwest, tornadoes, there were a lot of them, okay? So I think some of these things are cyclical, okay? As somebody explained to me, the Earth on its axis is not like this, it's like this. And so when it spins, every so often, every years, things change and go out of sync a little bit. So maybe there was a lot of bad things, but the good news is I think we have an opportunity to make a difference. And that's why I'm sitting on InfraGard in the role I'm on. I want to make a difference. I just don't want to be there. I just don't want to do something. And all the people that I've been, you know, exposed to, particularly in this group, you know, share, I think, that they want to make a difference. They want to do something. So we take all this we learned the next couple days, these couple days, and let's go make a difference. Okay.
I just said two quick things to tie it there. The things that went right for us, we basically pre-declared the disaster. So movement of resources happened very quickly, social media coordination during the rescue, and the decision to enlist citizens. And if you tie it back to EMP, the first responders could not handle it. I mean, literally tens of thousands of people were in jeopardy, and that's when we enlisted the citizens. And local resources could only be there because most areas were flooded. We had all these little islands. There was no way to get people there, so the boats and things were the citizens that helped out. And then the coordination was only possible, again, as I said earlier, because of electric and cell phone.
I'd say to Hank, you know, you're talking about, where's Hank Cooper? Is he still here? Hank, you know, you're talking about what we're doing down there in South Carolina. Maybe some of that planning could go down to Puerto Rico to help them build it right as they start to rebuild, you know? That's a possibility, huh?
Well, hopefully Bruce is going to get some money to fix Puerto Rico. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, panel.